Adventure and role-playing games are fairly standard fare today, but in the pre-crash world of home consoles, there were very few games that even resembled the swords and sorcery and dungeon-delving games many of us love. Sure, PCs already had that market covered with games like Wizardry and Ultima, but consoles really didn't have a lot to scratch that itch. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or AD&D for short, was massively popular in the late 70s and early 80s, not only being the pen-and-paper role-playing game that would spawn hundreds of imitators and cause Christian groups to be up in arms about perceived ties to the occult for its use of magic and demonic monsters, but also spreading out into novels, a children's TV show, and video game franchises. However, there were no formally licensed Dungeons & Dragons games until Mattel acquired the license. In 1982, Mattel released Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, later referred to as Cloudy Mountain, a game that would try and bring all the excitement of a world of swords and sorcery to the Intellivision to try to make their system appeal to people wanting a more involved game than what the Atari 2600 could provide. So grab a wineskin of your favorite ale and gather around the fire, because we're going to take a look at Advanced Dungeons & Dragons for the Mattel Intellivision. Before I talk about the game itself, we have to talk about the Intellivision controller. Unlike the Atari 2600 joystick that had one button, the Intellivision controller had a 12-button numeric keypad, 4 side buttons, and a control disc that would detect 16 directions. Most games came with overlays that would show you what the buttons did for each game, which made it easier for you to pick up and play a game without a manual. For AD&D, that meant 1 through 9 fired your arrows in the 8 major directions, the disc moved you, and the other buttons did utilities such as picking up items and using ladders. When the game starts, you're presented with the Overworld map. You start in the cabin on the left side of the screen and are displayed as 3 dots, which is the number of adventurers that you have. Using the keypad to move around on the map screen, your goal is to get through the mountains, forests, and rivers to get to the cloud-covered mountain on the right side of the map. Inside that mountain is the Crown of Kings, which has been broken into 2 pieces and is guarded by the winged dragons. Get to that mountain, obtain both pieces, and you win the game. However, before you can get to Cloudy Mountain, you'll need to navigate through the terrain to get there, and that means finding an axe to get through the forests, a boat to get through the rivers, and a key which will unlock the gates that stand in your way. These items are all located inside caves in the other mountains that cover the landscape. Move close to a black mountain and it'll change to a color to show what sort of monsters and tools are inside. Gray mountains have basic supplies, red will contain the axe, blue has the boat, purple has the key. Once you've obtained an axe, boat, or key, you can use them multiple times, so there's no reason to go through 6 purple mountains unless you're just enjoying the game. Once you enter one of these mountains, you're transported to the cave exploration view. Here you can see your adventurer much closer and you move with a control disc. The keypad again will fire your arrows, however arrows are very limited. You only start with 3. You need to find quivers to get more, and quivers are in all dungeons, but seem to be in larger quantities in the gray colored mountains. When you start in a new cave, you can only see areas of the cave where you've already been, almost like the fog of war you'd see in games like Warcraft or Civilization. As you explore the caves, the areas you've already uncovered will stay visible. The goal in these caves is to find your way to the tool or supply that you need, then find the exit ladder to get back to the surface and continue on your way to the Cloudy Mountain. But there are plenty of other things living in these caves that don't want to make your journey a cakewalk, and that's an assortment of monsters who will do anything they can to block your way. Some monsters, like bats and spiders, are more annoying than anything else. Spiders can't hurt you, but if they touch you, they'll slowly steal your arrows, which is your only defense against the tougher monsters. Bats don't hurt you, but they make loud noises, which will block out the sounds that other monsters make in the dungeon. Blobs are incredibly slow, but impossible to kill, and touching one pretty much guarantees you die instantly. The remaining monsters are the dangerous ones that guard the exits and the items you're looking for in the caves. Thankfully, the game provides you with hints to let you know when one is nearby. This game has no music or ambient noise in the background. In fact, the silence of the game is extremely important to these hints. Rats live in the gray caves generally and are silent until you find one. However, they do leave little mouse tracks. Snakes are mostly in the red caverns and make a slurping sound if you're in the room next to them. Demons are found in the blue caves and also have tracks on the ground like mice, but they are silent even when they fight you. And the dragons and winged dragons will loudly snore if you're nearby, and when you do find one, they'll loudly roar at you, a sound that terrified me at 5 and still does a little bit right now. These cues are extremely important to your survival, as all monsters will charge you the moment they're visible. Most of the larger monsters take 2 to 3 arrows to kill, and as long as you've been conserving your arrows, you should be able to handle them if you get the jump on them. If not, you won't survive long if they reach you. If you die in the caves, your next adventurer shows up at the start of that cave with a map that you've already explored. This makes the next attempt at that cave much more manageable. If you run out of all 3 lives, your adventure is over. If you manage to obtain the tools required to get to Cloudy Mountain, you have to explore the caves there to find the 2 pieces of the Crown of Kings, guarded by the most dangerous and aggressive monsters in the game, the winged dragons, who take 3 hits apiece to kill. Kill both of them, get both pieces of the crown, and you'll win the game. Like most games of this era, some parts of this game are a little lacking and unforgiving compared to more recent games. The limited arrows is a novel concept so that you're not trying to just blast your way into every room, but as the game has plenty of randomized locations, maps, and items, it's also very easy to use those arrows early on and get stuck in a place where you will not have any way to survive. Speaking of the arrows, they also bounce off walls, which will definitely hurt you if they fly back into you. They do a fair amount of damage, which can also result in one of your 3 lives being lost. Sometimes the game will spawn blobs in such a way that you can easily box yourself into an area you can't get out of as well, without risking touching a blob, which is almost guaranteed to kill you. That same randomization, however, is also what makes this game incredibly replayable. The overworld map is somewhat randomized, and depending on the layout of the map, you may or may not need a specific tool. You may be able to get to Cloudy Mountain without a key or a boat. So if you're willing to explore caves just to find the exits, you can reach Cloudy Mountain with just 1 or 2 of the main tools. The game is also relatively short. You can make your way to Cloudy Mountain in just 10 or 15 minutes if you plan your path properly. So dying to poor planning or randomization isn't going to mean you've wasted your entire weekend. Despite that it's barely taking advantage of the Dungeons & Dragons license, and it's not really a role-playing game at all, this game is still extremely fun to play and does capture the feel of exploring caverns, searching dungeons, and fighting off ferocious beasts. I'd actually compare this game to a far more involved Berserk or Robotron than a traditional role-playing game. But after all these years, if I play this in a dark room with the volume turned up, I still think those dragons might be the most terrifying encounters I've ever had in a video game.